So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our Peer Support Services Technical Assistance Center Kickoff event. I'm Yvette Kelly and I'm the Director of Children's Services and Healthcare Innovation at NYU's McSilver Institute. And together with Rita Kronice from Rutgers Academy of Peer Services, we will be co-leading this initiative. So I do want to take a moment to just acknowledge that there are a number of our colleagues from both the McSilver Institute, Families Together in New York State, and the Academy of Peer Services who have assisted in getting this initiative off the ground. So just want to say thank you. We are also thankful to the Office of Mental Health for funding this project to facilitate large-scale inclusion of peer support services in mental health settings. And so we do appreciate you guys joining us today, and we're looking forward to telling you more about this new initiative. Before we begin, I do want to take a few moments to just run through some of the logistics. So upon joining, all participants have been muted. However, since we'd like to hear from all of you, we do ask that if you have any questions to please type your question into the Zoom chat box. We will be devoting some time at the end of today's presentation for Q&A. And so, happy to entertain any questions that you may have. Today's presentation and slides will be made available and posted to our webpage at PeerTAC.org. And the link for this page will be provided at the end of the presentation so that you'll know how to access those resources. If you experience any technical issues during the presentation, please reach out to our admin staff who will be able to assist you. Okay, and so let me just this slide. And so we'd love to know who has joined us on the call today. So we are asking that if you could take a moment to respond to our poll question. There's going to be a poll that will come up momentarily. And if you could share with us your primary role at your organization, again, just so we understand who's on the call today. That would be helpful. So we're going to give folks just a couple minutes. You should see a pop-up box. If you could just pick one, that would be helpful. Give a few seconds for the poll. So Angelique, you can just let me know what we're doing in terms of time. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So we have a little bit of everyone. We have some clinic leadership, supervisors, peer support specialists, and advocates, and others. And so thank you again. It's helpful for us just to know who has joined us today. So I appreciate you responding to that. All right. And lastly, as we launch this new initiative, we are looking forward to getting feedback from the field to inform future training needs. So we are requesting participation in our PeerTAC survey. We will put the link in the chat. So if you have time after today's presentation, we would appreciate your response. And if not, you'll have the link to access it in the future. And again, just want to iterate that we are really looking for information and feedback in terms of what the field believes would be necessary in terms of training in TA. So again, we'll provide this information in the slides when they're made available. And so with that, I am going to pass it over to our partners at OMH to get us started.
Thanks so much, Yvette, and everyone on this call today. My name is Amanda Fake, and I'm Chief Advocacy Officer, and I oversee the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services at the New York State Office of Mental Health. We were formerly known as the Office of Consumer Affairs. I am a person with lived experience of mental health issues, participation in mental health services. I've experienced trauma while participating in mental health services, and also the stigma experienced by so many of us with mental health issues. I'm also a certified peer specialist. And I started my career in mental health as a licensed master social worker. For many years, I did not share my personal lived experience in my work. After participating in intentional peer support training several years into my career, my life and my relationship with mental health changed. I started using my personal lived experience in my work, first as a prose director and moving into a mutuality-based dynamic with those I served is truly where my recovery journey began. Same as when I participated in mutual peer support with other peer supporters, many of whom are on the call today in our community. For so long, recovery for me was taking my medications and doing whatever I could to never have to go to inpatient services again. My work is the biggest part of my recovery, and I never wanted to compromise that. It wasn't until, though, I experienced peer support that I realized the multifaceted approach to healing, resilience, and recovery. Peer support has saved my life and helped me and held me accountable to life and recovery. Peer support is so incredibly powerful. And now that we're expanding peer services into more of our programs, which Commissioner Sullivan will mention in her video introduction, that thousands of New Yorkers who haven't had access to peer support in our system will now have access in our mental health outpatient and rehabilitative services programs, along with some of the other programs where we're introducing peer support for the first time. Thank you for being here today and taking part in a truly historic moment for mental health services and for peer support. Commissioner Sullivan, my supervisor and true champion of peer support services and the peer workforce, has some opening remarks, and then I'll speak again after her video.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ann Sullivan, your Commissioner for the New York State Office of Mental Health, and it is really my pleasure today to welcome you to PeerTAC, the very first webinar of a series of webinars that will help us all provide the very best practices as we begin to incorporate more and more peer supports into our programs. The Peer Support Technical Assistance Center is providing these webinars, and today is the kickoff one, the very first. Thank you for being here. It means that you're committed to having excellent peer support services in your programs. So I want to thank the OMH clinics who are present, as well as the community-based clinics who are here to learn how to make sure that recovery, resiliency, and that in the process of helping all our clients reach their full recovery and resiliency, that our peer support network, that our peer supports are capable of working to the top level of their experience and their ability. That means we need to know best practices. We need to know how to incorporate peer support services into our organizations, into our clinics, and into our system of care. Your being here today shows how committed you are to that, and I can't thank you enough for that. So welcome, and go forward and enjoy the webinar, and please remember to come to the subsequent webinars as well. Have a good day. Thanks.
OMH's vision is to ensure the promise of recovery and resiliency for all. Peer support services are essential to the behavioral health system. OMH is committed to continually evaluating and evolving the inclusion of peer support services in mental health programming. We value the partnership and feedback from our peer community, people who participate in services, families, and advocates to further inform policy and program development and enhancement. Peer support is an evidence-based practice recognized by CMS in 2007. The opportunity to offer peer support services is now available through our Article 31 mental health outpatient treatment and rehabilitative services to service users across the lifespan. children, youth, family, adult, and older adults. The inclusion of peer support services in traditional clinical settings is not business as usual. Standards of care must be met from the beginning. To assist with this, OMH has funded the Peer Support Services Technical Assistance Center, PeerTAC. Peer support services bring hope and a sense of healing to people who've experienced adversity due to mental health challenges. PeerTAC's vision is to ensure all people, regardless of age, race, socioeconomic status, stigma, or other factors that can limit the success of mental health services, have the option to receive peer support services. The role of PeerTAC is to aid organizations in the successful inclusion of peer support services. And in this session, you will hear about how PeerTAC is developing training and resources for organizational leaders, supervisors, clinical staff, and peer specialists and advocates. Establishing peer support services isn't as simple as going out and hiring a peer or family advocate. Same is true with contracting. Preparations for including peer and family specialist advocates on multidisciplinary care teams involves an honest, transparent assessment of the organization's and programmatic readiness for this inclusion. The organization and its members must share the values of teamwork and collaboration, be committed to peer inclusion, and have the capacity and skills to adopt new principles, framework, and practices. That's where PeerTAC comes in. PeerTAC can assist you with planning, preparation, and implementation. They can guide organizational change efforts that lead to a sustainable culture for peer support services to thrive. Members of PeerTAC include subject matter experts in the practices of peer support across the lifespan, youth, family, adults, and older adults. In this kickoff session, you will learn about training resources and the technical assistance that is available through PeerTAC 4, organizational leadership, supervision, and the peer specialists and advocates and multidisciplinary teams that work within the mental health outpatient treatment rehabilitative services clinic program. And with that, I will hand it off to Rita Crone.
Thank you, Amanda. And I'm Rita Cronice, and I'm a person with lived experience myself. I had several hospitalizations before I found peer support. I went to a peer support group for the first time. I found people that were like me, that accepted me for who I was instead of rejecting me for what they saw me doing. So to me, peer support is also powerful. Amanda mentioned that, she did the things she could do to stay out of the hospital. I was very much like that too in my own recovery journey. But for me, peer support was probably the most important thing that helped me to stay out of the hospital. It was a place to connect with other people who were managing what they were going through. And I learned to do the very same thing, and I learned to help to show other people to do those same things. As a peer supporter, I eventually went on to become a facilitator for the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. I've also been a facilitator in the Veterans Affairs Peer Specialist Training Program. And I've done training around the country on recovery and peer support. At one point, I had the wonderful opportunity to work for at that time it was called the International Association of Peer Supporters. I was instrumental in helping to develop the national practice guidelines for peer support. So when I came to Rutgers, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and that was to work on the Academy of Peer Services. And for the last 10 years, I've had pretty much my dream job to be able to both use my instructional design training along with my peer support passion to create and to bring the Academy of Peer Services into fruition. So I just want to start out by doing a little bit of some of the basics of what is peer support versus what is peer support services. Very simply put, peer support is a natural human response when people in a particular circumstance reach out to help others in the same or very similar circumstance. It's the act of a person who has experienced a particular challenge, helping someone else to deal with that same life challenge. Naturally occurring peer support offers a person the hope of facing a challenge with the support of someone who's been there. It's not limited to mental health or substance use recovery. And that was a quote from Steve Harrington, who was my mentor at the International Association of Peer Supporters. He was a wise man. But there's a distinction, and often there's some confusion about what exactly is peer support. Well, peer support is that naturally occurring tendency to want to help others. But peer support services are something beyond that, a little bit different. And while there's similarities, there's a difference between that naturally occurring peer support and peer support services. When providing peer support as a service, there's the added responsibilities of job tasks, documentation, reporting, working with a variety of colleagues, and working under supervision. Those who provide paid peer support services, which make the relationship with a person a little more complex, but the benefits of reaching and building trusting relationships with people through the service can be nearly as rewarding as that naturally occurring peer support. So what are peer support services? Whether they're provided for youth, family, adult, or older adults, these services combined in what we're going to be talking to you more about through PeerTAC are all considered peer support services. And the people who provide those services are known as peer specialists and advocates. So those who provide peer support services are cultural and recovery ambassadors. They promote connection and inspire hope. As members of an integrated care team, peer specialists, advocates make contributions that assist with engagement, practical assistance, and to achieve and sustain skills, development of coping mechanisms, empowerment, and building relationships. And so PeerTAC is a combination of the adult peer services that we've developed through the Academy of Peer Services and the youth and family peer support, peer advocacy that's been developed through McSilver and Families Together in New York State. And with that, I'd like to hand over to our partner, Paige Pierce with Families Together.
Thanks, Rita. As Rita described, the importance of peer support. I saw in the survey that 29% of the people attending today identify as peers. So that's fantastic. We're preaching to the choir. So many of you have already heard this story before, but when we talk at Families Together and at any of the peer support kinds of organizations about the value of peer support, it's really important to also just remember, that we're talking to people beyond just us as peers. I identify as a peer, as a family peer, as I have a young person who's no longer that young, who has been involved in multiple systems. And at Families Together in New York State, we like to say nothing about us without us, meaning that a lot of policies that can be formed that are going to impact us and our families and our young people need to include that peer input. Any kind of stakeholder input will result in better outcomes. And a really good illustration of peer support that I think illustrates how valuable it can be is, many of you have heard this story before about the guy who falls into a hole and he's in deep and he can't get out. And a rich man comes by and says, I'm stuck in this hole. Can you help me? And he throws some money down and walks away. And then a doctor comes by and he says, I'm in this hole and I need help getting out. Can you help me? And he throws down a prescription and walks away. And then a priest comes by and writes down a prayer and throws it in the hole and walks away. And then another person comes by and gets in the hole. And he says, why did you get in the hole? Now we're both down here. And he said, I've been in this hole and I know the way out. That's peer support. That's the kind of value the peer support provides that has nothing to do with the number of letters after your name, but rather about, your lived experience. And that's why we're here. And with that, I wanted to introduce Carrie Ann Rollier, who is our Director of Workforce Development at Families Together. And Carrie Ann's going to talk about the value of peer support within family peer support.
Thank you, Paige. So I also identify as a family peer, as I have all three of my children who have had some some experience in different systems. Could we switch slides, please? One back. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about specific benefits of family peer support. So family peer support actively partners with families. It invests in caregiver involvement and actively partners with those families. It expands possibilities for parental involvement at multiple levels and cultivates a community of peer support. Family peer support also increases engagement in services, develops a competent mental health consumers through training, mentorships, and activities. You'll see an increase in social support and fostering communities. Family peer advocates facilitate connections to services, agencies, activities, trainings, and other families. Family peer support is strength-based. It focuses on building strengths and resources of the family and the child. It focuses on identifying needs and strengths, bridges successes of the past with options for continued success. There's an increase in self-efficiency. It provides current information, resources, and appropriate interventions to help caregivers in their decision-making. It removes stigma and feelings of isolation. It helps to remove the stigma by showing caregivers that they're not alone. Embracing diversity, family peer advocates listen without judgment to families' ideas, preferences, and decisions while acknowledging the family's struggles, efforts, and successes. And they accept and honor those differences. And it creates purpose and fosters hope by creating a safe environment that will help with both growth and empowerment of the families and caregivers. And I'm going to pass it along to Robbie Latera, who is our Director of Youth Training at Families Together in New York State.
Thanks, Carrie Ann, and thanks everyone else. Hey everybody, my name is Robbie Latera. I am the Director of Youth Training at Families Together in New York State. I'm sorry if my voice is a little froggy or softer than usual. I am getting over being sick. So I too have personal lived experience in both the mental health system and also the healthcare system. So I can absolutely attest to the power of peer support. And as I'm sure all of us here can, talk for the benefits of peer support for hours on end. Just to keep things moving, I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the benefits of specifically youth peer support. So to start, youth peer support is a proactive versus reactive approach to mental health and emotional distress. So youth who also work with YPAs were much more likely to experience positive social interactions, both within services and within their communities. Youth peer support increases the confidence in young people by showing them that they aren't alone in their struggles and that they can turn to other people who have been through what they've gone through and get genuine and authentic feedback. The mutuality aspect of peer support really increases engagement, again, both within services and especially within community as well. It helps to remove stigma and feelings of isolation. Young people are much more likely to turn to their peers for support instead of turning to adults and adult professionals for support. Young people who had access to youth peer support were very satisfied with their services. And in fact, they were much more satisfied than their counterparts who did not have access to youth peer support. When asked, young people had a very strong desire that peer supports are available to them in multiple aspects within their community. So not only if they are attending a program, but also within their school system, within their leisure places, within, like, say they are working in or they go to class at a theater or art program. They want more peer support services available to them within their community, as well as within the mental health and cross systems involvement. Young people benefit by gaining skills, knowledge, and self-esteem. Youth peer support also increases hope and the belief in possibility of recovery, empowerment, and self-esteem, self-efficacy, self-management, the management of their own difficulties, and positive social connections and engagements. Organizations benefit by having youth peer advocates on board by improving their programs and gaining community recognition, and even by attracting funders. It also helps to really align with youth values so that there's youth voice that is infused within the programs of each organization. So youth peer support and youth peer advocates lead to an increased number of youth members and participants within these organizations, where there are youth that are initially and they are primarily being served. So adults benefit by enhancing their own competencies and learning to better understand and value youth, as well as increasing their commitment and energy to their organizations. Communities benefit by improving the quality of life, by coordinating youth services, and authentically embracing diversity by having young people represented. The development of a social support network, a social connection, and community engagement is really at the root of youth peer support. And it really fosters hope for these young people by creating a purpose for them, and also by allowing the ability for young people to understand, relate, and to connect with older youth who have gone through similar experiences. By giving youth the opportunity to overcome challenges and make meaningful connections, that is one of the core values of youth peer support, or those who go on to become youth peer advocates. And of course, by being able to use that personal lived experience for something larger than themselves is one of the other beautiful aspects of youth peer support. I would love to keep going on forever, but I know that we are on time crunch. So thank you all very much. And I'm going to pass it back over to Yvette.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Robbie. And just thank you for all of the partners who just really highlighted the benefits of peer support services. And it really does speak to the need and the importance of these services, and why we want to make sure that providers have the resources that they need. And so I'm going to move on to just talk a little bit about PeerTAC and its origination. And so, PeerTAC has been established, as I mentioned, with funding through OMH to facilitate the inclusion of peer support services in mental health settings. The primary focus of the center will be on helping mental health organizations across the state, such as the clinics, to hire or contract with peer-run and peer-staffed organizations for the inclusion of certified peer specialists, credentialed family peer advocates, and credentialed youth peer advocates, which are the 3 OMH recognized peer credentials. And so now with the option to bill Medicaid for peer support services, it really does create greater opportunity for peer support workers to join the workforce. And our role in PeerTAC will be to provide the training and technical assistance to that is supportive to help make sure that that inclusion process goes smoothly and is ultimately successful. So just to talk about a little bit about who we are, 2 organizations were chosen to support this effort: the Academy of Peer Services, which is managed by Rutgers, and the NYU's McSilver Institute, which operates both the Managed Care and Community Technical Assistance Center. So you will know them as MCTAC and CTAC. The Academy of Peer Services is an online training and testing platform for the adult peer specialist certification, and CTAC, in collaboration with Families Together in New York State and Youth Power, manages the training and credentialing for the youth and family peer advocate credentials. And so this is not a complete picture. PeerTAC will be consulting with peer-run and peer-savvy organizations to really assist with developing training, offering consultation, and identifying other supports needed to help organizations meet the challenges of including peer support services as a new or expanded offering in more traditional mental health settings. So that's going to be important to hear from the field. So who is served by PeerTAC? So PeerTAC is specifically designed to, again, provide training and TA and consultation to organizations who are offering peer support services or would like to offer peer support services across the lifespan. So this includes support for youth, families, adults, and older adults. Again, because this is a brand new service for many of these provider agencies, we anticipate a need for the organizational leadership, supervisors, non-peer professionals to receive a wide range of training on how to best include and support peer support services in their setting. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rita just to walk through some slides in terms of what we offer.
Thank you so much, Yvette. So what we had envisioned with PeerTAC is sort of a hub of technical assistance where we provide a tiered menu of training and technical assistance and resources to go along with those resources and tools and toolkits to support best practices. We'll be envisioning and creating learning community opportunities and online and in-person training for both providers and the peer workforce. With responsive training, as needs come up, we're going to be responding to that training with both technical assistance and all of these menu of training, technical assistance, learning communities, and different opportunities. And with that hub of technical assistance, we are going to be bringing in more partners. Right now we have Families Together in New York State and Youth Power as one of our partners. We're working with other partners that will be coming on board very soon. So how do we involve our stakeholders? Well, one of the first things that we did was we developed an advisory council, and we've got 12 people who are in the peer, they are peers, they're supervisors, and we're working with organizational leaders to help us to determine what most is needed as we further develop the PeerTAC deliverables. We have coming up some opportunities to work with stakeholders through listening forums and potentially affinity groups of executive leaders. We could have them working together, program managers and service providers, as well as supervisors, and with peer support specialists. All of that is sort of on the drawing board right now, but we'll be formalizing that in the very near future. And Yvette, this one's yours.
Yes, thanks. And so as we launch this new initiative, PeerTAC is building out a number of resources that will be helpful to providers as they begin to implement or expand peer support services. This includes a website which will house all of our training and resources. So that will be coming shortly. Webinars to provide really a self-paced online trainings to support learning a variety of peer-related topics. These webinars will be archived and available to all providers. We will develop a number of tools and resources that will aid in understanding of the key concepts and key values. Learning communities, again, will provide opportunities for agencies to collaborate on developing implementation strategies to adopt best practices that are consistent with recovery and resiliency values. And then we'll also review quality improvement activities agencies can engage in to ensure that they are remaining true to the peer support values.
So a little bit about our website. As I mentioned before, we're creating this hub of information about peer support services, and what we envision will be able to go out to other organizations to find pathways to different information as is needed. But we will be providing training and resources which you'll be able to find on the website. We also have a frequently asked question document that's already available and will be available at the end of this particular session. And on that website, we'll have a place where you can ask PeerTAC questions. You can contact us directly, and we can help to provide technical assistance that way.
And we will also host a variety of webinars, as I just mentioned before. Let me just move the slide, on priority topic areas that are targeted to different audiences, and it will include both live and pre-recorded webinars with selected subject matters. Some of our immediate areas of focus will be on detailing what peer support services are, creating a culture for success, hiring and onboarding, and supervision. And these are just a few of the critical areas required in implementing peer services. So we will be rolling those topics out. And of course, I'm just going to give another plug for our survey here. That's why it's so important for us to hear from you guys in terms of what other areas you feel would be important as you implement peer support services. So please, if you have an opportunity to complete the survey, we definitely want to hear from everyone. It will just help inform our topic areas.
And not just the survey, you can add ideas in the chat. So if you have ideas about topic areas that are needed, then you can go ahead and add that into the chat as well.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, let's just go back for the toolkit. In an effort to make sure we're offering a robust set of technical assistance offerings, we're also including a variety of toolkits and resources. So PeerTAC will work to develop a number of resources and aids that providers can reference and utilize as a roadmap for implementing peer support services successfully, including a guidebook, hiring toolkits, supervision checklists, and evaluation tools. We'll also be developing an organizational self-assessment so providers can identify those areas in which their organizations should focus. And to promote shared understanding of these services, we will also develop a FAQ and glossary. And again, all of these resources will be publicly available on our resource, and we'll provide a couple links at the end of this presentation so you know where to find this information.
Great, thank you. And then learning communities. This is an important one that I think is going to really bring PeerTAC and all of the peer workforce and the opportunity for doing peer services well to life. We will be having stakeholder forums where we're going to be listening to what's needed, and we'll be providing ideas for what can be implemented within the workforce. The inclusion of peer support services, it kind of is an inclusion effort. You know, as you think of all of the inclusion efforts that are happening, peer support services are one of those inclusion efforts. And there's information that we can share, but also a lot that we can learn from each other. And that's the whole thing about learning communities. It's not about us just telling you what to do, even if we have a lot of, references and resources. It's more about what do you need and how are you doing it, and then sharing that with each other. That's the true spirit of peer support anyway. What did we learn and what can we share? What do we need and can we learn from each other? So these learning communities are going to be very much about that. What can we learn together in preparing the culture, in hiring and onboarding, in doing peer networking, in doing supervision? We're going to learn all of that with each other all along the way.
Yeah, and so as we work to support organizations in ensuring kind of fidelity to the principles of peer support services, Rita, can you move that slide for me? I'm sorry, just lost access.
I did too.
All right.
Angelique, would you?
Oops, it looks like we're having.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Looks like we're having some technical difficulties. But as she looks to put the slide back up, so again, we're going to be working to support organizations in ensuring fidelity to the principles of peer support. And so this will really look at determining what fidelity measures we can use and roll out to organizations to really benchmark themselves against perhaps other agencies. We are considering an organizational self-assessment tool, which will be, again, developed to assist organizational leadership in identifying concerns and priority areas that they want to focus on. Outcome measures will be explored, as I mentioned previously, and we want to work with agencies to really identify quality improvement activities that agencies can engage in to ensure they're really remaining true to the peer support values. And thank you.
So sorry about that. It seemed to glitch.
It's okay. Sometimes we have technology challenges. And so when thinking about all of this, again, we are going to be working with organizations to really think this through. Again, the overall goal of the PeerTAC is really to help organizations successfully implement peer support services. And so with that, we're going to move on to just reviewing some frequently asked questions that we know we often get when we're talking about the implementation of peer services. We, as I mentioned earlier, where we will have an FAQ document that folks can access on our website, and you can look at that, and that really is pretty comprehensive and really answers a lot of the questions that we've gotten regarding this service. And so we do know that there's a couple questions that we're just going to walk through because they are, again, frequently asked questions. And so I think, Rita, maybe there's a couple that we just want to highlight here.
Certainly. So why offer peer support services anyway? So that's a question that kind of comes up, and especially as the clinics are thinking about, well, should we be offering these services or not? Well, numerous research studies have indicated that when added as a primary service to treatment, peer specialists and advocates play a significant role in improving health and wellness because of their ability to build trust, form one-on-one relationships, and foster hope for others. The peer specialist advocates know what the struggle is like because they've experienced similar challenges. They can understand the thoughts and feelings of people going through resilience and recovery, or caring for a child with social and emotional challenges. Peer specialist advocates utilize their lived experience and expertise of resilience and recovery with others in their work. Their experience of learning to grow and thrive while facing similar challenges puts them in a position to share meaningful lessons learned in a way that people receiving services view as highly credible. So that's one of the first questions. Yvette, you want to take the next one?
Sure, thank you. And so this question is, are peer support services a required service? And so the answer to that is no. Peer support services are optional, and they do not require OMH prior approval to provide these services. So if your organizations are interested, and again, you can consult with PeerTAC to kind of think through some of the things some of the resources that could be helpful in onboarding these services. We would highly recommend that if you're able to implement these services, because we talked about the benefits and the values. They are not listed on the operating certificate, and they do not need to be listed on the license. So just to clarify that.
Thank you, Yvette. And where can peer support services be offered? Peer support services may be provided in individual or group settings at the mental health outpatient treatment and rehabilitation services program site or offsite, as well as via telehealth. When peer support services are delivered, the peer perspective must be integrated into the interdisciplinary team approach to care. And quite a bit of our upcoming trainings and offerings are going to be about that, integrating into the interdisciplinary team approach. It's about inclusion efforts. It's about how to prepare the organization and the culture for receiving peer support services. Because again, as Amanda said in the very beginning, it's not business as usual. You can't just hire one peer into your organization and consider yourself having peer support services. It really requires that team approach and the ability for the peer specialists to feel welcome in order to do the job that they're there to accomplish.
And then the last question is, how are peer support services defined in clinic programs? So peer support services are broken down into components to serve the three separate populations, so youth, family, adult, and older adult. Each service component has a unique service definition and scope of practice, so definitely would want to refer you to that guidance for further information. And they also have specialized staff qualifications as well.
Thank you. So here are the resources that we have for further information. On the Part 599 clinic website, on the OMH website, there is the guidance document on peer support services for adults and family and youth. And we now have this frequently asked questions document that will be posted on our PeerTAC website, where the 4 questions that you just saw are just a few of many questions that are broken down by category of what are peer support services, hiring and onboarding peer support services, integrating peers into the culture change that's necessary for integrating peer support services into your culture, and supervision, which are the next 5 topics that we're going to be presenting on through PeerTAC, but there's much more. So yeah, I highly recommend that you take a look at that frequently asked questions document. And now it's time to open the floor for you all to ask your questions. And I believe we've been gathering them through the chat. So
we have been gathering. Hi, everybody. This is Ann Kuppinger with McSilver, and lots of great questions are coming in, and also some comments, some recommendations for future training. And so I'm glad we left time to answer these questions, and hopefully, if these questions trigger other questions, feel free to keep chatting those in. So, kind of in no particular order, we'll tackle these. One question that came in right on is, right early was, what is the difference between peer support and self-help? And the questioner also added the comment, I learned self-help before I learned about peer support.
Self-help is that mutual experience, the mutual aid that you give to each other, like we have in support groups. So self-help is often more in a group setting, and peer support, it can be in a group setting, but it's much more about one-on-one support. I think that's probably a good first answer to that.
That sounds great. There is a question here about whether there is a version of intentional peer support that's available for youth peer advocates.
That's a really good question. I would have to defer that to Sherry Mead and Chris Hansen, who are the originators of intentional peer support. I'm not sure if they've ever done one that's specific to youth, but it would be certainly a great training.
We'll add that to the list of things to be explored. Thanks for that question. Next question is there a difference between certified recovery peer advocate and certified peer specialist?
Certainly, the certified recovery peer advocate has training that is more specifically to substance use recovery, whereas the certified peer specialist is more in the area of mental health recovery. There's a lot of similarities, but there are also some differences because who we're providing support for really matters. And if you're providing somebody in substance use, that's a little bit different focus than somebody who is experiencing mental health challenges. So I'll leave that there.
Okay. So, you did address this a little bit, but maybe elaborate again on the purpose of PeerTAC. And the person is saying, for example, as a peer support or a peer recovery advocate, can I contact PeerTAC for professional support, such as questions on ethics or Americans with Disability Act needs that they have? So I think the court person is just asking for a little bit more elaboration on exactly how PeerTAC is going to work and the manner in which technical assistance is going to be provided.
Those are certainly areas that we can explore. It's not an area that we're doing at the very beginning, but as these questions come in for technical assistance, we can, field them and see how we can provide assistance, I would think.
Yeah, and I also just want to kind of comment on that just in terms of accessing us. And we are in the process of launching a full website. And I do want to say that there are opportunities to ask questions. It's called Ask PeerTAC, where you'll be able to kind of reach out to us and chat in and ask a question and you'll get a response. So again, as we're kind of just getting this off the ground, it's helpful to hear these questions and kind of hear what the needs are. That's why I keep kind of going back to the survey, because we do want to be responsive to that. But I just wanted to also say that there will be opportunities to connect and reach out. And if we have the answer, we'll provide the answer or try to link you to someone who's able to provide that answer.
Thanks, Yvette, and thanks, Rita.
Amanda's sake.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to add, we will have an initiative. It's not online yet, but it's called the Peer Workforce Advancement and Mentoring Network that is dedicated exclusively for the peer workforce. So questions, related to ADA are definitely things that this new advancement and mentoring network will be able to work directly with folks on. And that will be coming online in a few months, and we'll share more about that in the future.
Thanks, Amanda. So somebody made an observation that they're concerned about peers who were unable for whatever reason to obtain a high school diploma or an alternative, and what kinds of barriers there might be for those individuals to become certified peer specialists, family or youth peer advocates. So this question and a number of other questions like it, the answers are different depending on which type of credential or certification you might be applying for. But I guess I'd ask those of our panelists who are on the call today who are in a position to address that for your particular credential to say something about how you consider a high school diploma in the context of someone seeking a credential or a certification.
Well, I'm not in a position to speak for the certification board, but and that's actually changing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can just kind of pat Des, thank you so much for that question. And presently, for the New York Certified Peer Specialist credential, high school diploma or high school equivalency is required. That has been something that is required by CMS. However, as I've talked to my counterparts in other states, there are some things that we can do about this. So nothing as of yet, but it's a really important question, and definitely something Pat and others I'd love to continue to engage with folks on. And that, of course, as I'm going to speaking for the adult New York Certified Peer Specialist credential.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Carrie Ann or Robbie, you want to weigh in about the family and youth peer advocate credential requirements.
Yeah, so for the family peer support credential, there is a comparable skills form that can be filled out. I believe it needs, I'm actually trying to look at it right now. It needs a supervisor's signature on it. And what it is stating that this person, while they do not have a high school diploma or a GED, they do have comparable literacy skills that are, speaking skills and communication, written and speaking, and that they are able to perform those tasks that are going to be necessary to perform the job of the family peer advocate. I believe the same is true for the youth peer advocate, but I'll let Robbie confirm that.
Yeah, I was just gonna literally say ditto. It is exactly the same for the YPA credential.
That's what I thought.
Great. All right, one more question I think that's appropriate for the credentialing organizations to answer, which is, will trainings at PeerTAC will participation in PeerTAC trainings and events be eligible for continuing education credits that are required by all of these credentialing and certification bodies to renew your certificate?
Well, I can speak for both family and youth peer credentials on that. Yes, what we require is proof of attendance. So if there is a certificate that's given out, we like to see that certificate. If not, an email stating that you had registered and attended the event would suffice as well.
I think the adult peer certification, which I don't want to speak to specifically, I think they have a process in place now where they pre-approve trainings with their advisory board that are eligible for CEUs. And I'm sure that's something we'll be looking at together as we move forward with PeerTAC, how to create some good alignment with all of these processes. This is a question that I think is really kind of fundamental to PeerTAC and something we've all been thinking about. And I think a question that I'm excited about myself, about the opportunities here. And the question is this: how do you train and work with dual or triple peer supporters? This means that we are an individual peer support specialist, Also sometimes, and different in that role than when the person might be acting as a family peer support specialist, which this person finds themselves in, at least informally sometimes on a personal basis. And I was a youth who was in the mental health system. I also work differently with youth than others. How does PeerTAC bring all of these various roles and responsibilities together or separate them when necessary? What collaboration is there among the different kinds of peer support specialists in New York and in this project? So whoever wants to take that one on, I think it's a great question.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start, and Rita, please feel free to chime in, and others. So I think, from PeerTAC's perspective, what we want to try to do is bring together all of the peer support work and think through some of the foundational competencies and where appropriate to kind of address and speak to both adult, family, and youth peer advocate providers. But of course, there is some differences between them all. And so we are going to consider that as we roll out a number of trainings. I would say for the first kind of few trainings, we're really focused on really some foundational competencies, and a lot of them cut across all of those types. But I think that's a great question, and I think helps us understand kind of, again, what the training needs might be. So I don't know if others have anything else to add to that. But yeah, go ahead, Rita.
I was going to say it's in some respects it's a similar question to talking about do we want a certified peer specialist, or do we want a SERPA, which is in the substance use, and it really all depends on who is the audience that we're talking to. And even within the 3 certifications that we've got, there's also other groups like the older adults, which we may or may not be addressing their needs with all of the competencies that we're developing through our training. So we really have to think through who is it that we're going to be supporting ultimately, and what kinds of training needs to be available, and what kinds of working together needs to be available. Because I think one of the beauties is Families Together, works with youth power. And the family perspective is equally important to the youth perspective or the adult perspective when coming together to support a group, a family group especially. So I think it comes down to what are the needs that were being addressed.
Thank you both. So there's a couple questions that pertain to how in the workplace setting, where there are a variety of different kinds of professionals working together and collaborating to support a variety of participants in the program, how that's all going to get sorted out. So one of those questions is, will there be information on how to help organizations keep peer specialists and those they support on a level playing field, while also keeping a level playing field between the peer specialist and their co-workers? And I'll just ask a couple of these questions, and then you can kind of, put them together in terms of how you respond. There's also a question about, will there be some kind of guidance that shows the differentiation between a licensed therapist at a mental health outpatient treatment and rehabilitation service and a peer specialist? So how are we going to help everybody understand the roles, the individual roles of the various peer specialists and the role of the clinician, and help everybody figure out how to effectively collaborate together? Is that a role of PeerTAC, and what are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I'll jump right into that, because that is a role of PeerTAC, and I think one of our first few offerings is around this culture piece and understanding what does it mean to kind of work in a multi-disciplinary team, and what are the roles and responsibilities, and being clear about that. So I do think there's going to have to be a lot of education with providers around what are the roles of peers, how can they work together on multidisciplinary team from all sides, right? From organizational leadership to clinical staff to paraprofessionals, anyone who's going to be a part of that team. And that's going to be an important piece, because it is a bit different, right? And employing peers and understanding the peer values and what that means in terms of service provision is a bit different. And we're going to speak to that in a couple of our webinars, just around creating the culture. What are some of the things folks need to consider as they hire and onboard and supervise peer support services? Rita, were you going to say something? Yeah.
And I was just going to say, and supervision is one of those keys, and we've been gaining a lot of experience with how to best supervise peers. That's one of the things with our national practice guidelines. We created the role of the supervisor, and the supervisor really is kind of the most important element of being able to make sure that peers both are protected, within their roles, so that they're not suddenly doing things that are outside of their scope of practice, but also being able to help educate. As long as the supervisors are peer informed, they can help to supervise the rest of, or help to educate the rest of the organization as well. And we will be providing assistance through supervision as well as part of peer.
All right. So a couple questions really are have to do with how this is going to work for different groups of people who would benefit from peer services. So there's questions about how we make sure that the training and credentialing and support for peer specialists who speak other languages is available, looking at refugee and immigrant persons who would be excellent peer supporters for other people from their communities, and language access. So I think it's a question. I think it's at least something that we want to think about. I don't think we have answers for that right now, but I'm wondering if any of our panelists have any thoughts about some strategies for improving the accessibility of what's offered through PeerTAC, but maybe in the role of PeerTAC also thinking about that more broadly.
I think the capabilities of offering language, technology is quickly making it much easier to provide language translation, but technology alone cannot do it, because we really have to work with the actual people and the localization of how people are speaking and the language that they're using within different cultures and different groups. So that is an area that I think we really do need to look at and explore more deeply. And I don't have an answer right now, but it's certainly something we're going to need to look at soon.
Thank you, Rita. Just sifting through a few questions here. There's a question about how this works with Article 28 programs. Any of our state partners want to address that?
Anne, can you repeat the question?
So the question is simply, can they, and I think what they're referring to as peer services, be provided in an Article 28 program?
That is a great question. I don't know, my colleagues at OMH.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer exactly to that question, but I do. So Article 28 is regulated by DOH, correct? But they do have the ability to provide some mental health services. So it's a great question, but I think it's under a different authority. But my colleagues at OMH can clarify that a little more.
Yvette, this is Julie Lloyd. Yeah, I'll take that back. I'm not sure if Stacey Hale is still on or not, but I'm not positive about that. You're absolutely correct that Article 28 clinics are overseen by DOH, and so they have to abide by DOH regulations. So I'm not totally sure about the answer of, I think peer services might be able to be provided. I'm not sure if they can be billed for. So we can take that question back and see if we can find out the answer.
Terrific.
Yeah.
There's
and
also
Allison wrote in the chat that, Allison wrote in the chat that they can be provided but not billed, but we'll definitely come back with a comprehensive answer. So thanks, Julie.
Okay. There's also a question here that asks if OMH funded programs are required to follow these guidelines. I'm assuming guidelines that folks are talking about have to do with the 599 guidelines. But what we're talking about here, the guidelines we're talking about here, if I'm correct, pertain to those 599 licensed programs, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And just a reminder that peer support services are optional. So organizations can either choose to provide the services and they don't necessarily need to, get permission from OMH to do that. And so I just wanted to kind of say that because they're not required, although I would say they're highly recommended.
Okay. So in turn, there, the folks are recognizing that many people have co-occurring mental health and substance use needs. And one person said that for them personally, those needs overlap and they need both addressed in order to get some solid recovery. And the questioner says, I know there are many others like us. Will there be a training for dual recovery, perhaps combining the certified recovery peer advocate and New York State certified peer specialist?
Well, I think I can say that that's been a desire for a while. I also can say that receiving dual certification is always possible for people that are eligible for both. And dually certified individuals would best meet both of those needs. I also know that if somebody has the CERPA, the Certified Recovery Peer Advocate credential, they can be working in the mental health outpatient treatment rehabilitation services programs. But in order to be able to bill for peer support services, they're going to eventually need to, within a year, I think it is, Amanda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, within a year, they'll need to at least get provisionally certified with the certified peer specialist, the mental health certification.
Yes, that is correct. We in our mental health services, we recognize that the experience of mental health and substance use issues and just life experiences are not siloed by state authorities like OMH and OASIS, and we do as guidance to the providers is that when considering candidates that best meet the needs of your specific program, that people with the certified recovery peer advocate position with a credential can be considered. But and we'll have more guidance on this, but when you're interviewing the candidate and thinking about it, you have to make sure that that they meet. And you don't have to ask them about the criteria, but something to say, is that it's OMH's expectation that if you don't have one of OMH's 3 peer credentials, that you work within a reasonable time frame, a year hopefully, to become provisionally certified in one of the 3 OMH credentials. So thanks, Rita.
Yeah, and someone else asked about how do we ensure that peers are matched or trained with others with same system experience? And I think this is a bit of a work in progress, right? Like people may hold dual credentials, but be employed for one particular system or another. And I suspect at the local level, when a person comes in looking for support, if they feel like they need a different kind of peer support, hopefully there'll be a very robust kind of referral and networking process that gets them to a person that they feel can best meet their needs. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but I think that's probably how that will work in real life. All right. No easy answers, right? It's just a matter of trying to get people connected. A couple of just observations that people are making. One is that it's going to be really important to train on the impact of someone's immigration status and the stress that comes with that, including the stress of finding healthcare services. So I think that can go on our list of things that would be important to train all peers on, to be aware of the mental health impact of that kind of stress, but also on the logistics and rules and regulations and opportunities for folks whose immigration status is leaves them feeling vulnerable. There's also someone talking about, this is actually a really specific question kind of related to that, which is it's difficult to find multilingual providers, and the person is asking, is there an update about using language modifiers like the modifier U4 when billing for a session?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't think I know the answer to that, but that's a good question.
No, I don't know the answer to that either, but
Yeah.
yeah, these are all really great questions. I did
Yeah, we'll try to get answers to those.
Yeah.
I did want to loop back to the matching. You know, I was kind of trying to think, you know, how do you match people with experience, with the right kind of experience? And I know when I worked at the VA for a while. Now, I don't have military experience, but when I was hired in, I was doing the self-help model of support groups, and they wanted to have somebody that led support groups. So I went into the VA for about a year. And I worked with veterans, but I never really quite made the connection because I didn't have that military experience. And especially for the combat vets, they really wanted people that had that military combat experience. So I very much appreciate and agree with the idea that the culture that you're working with, whether it's language culture, whether it's the experience culture, whether it's the, you know, gender culture, whatever the culture is, that matching is so important. And I was thinking, I'm sorry I didn't speak up earlier, but I was trying to think it through. We have peer-run organizations around the entire state who have many opportunities to help people to match up with people that have matching experience. So if we're working in a clinic and we're finding that we're not meeting that match, there is the opportunity for the mental health outpatient treatment recovery services programs to contract for services with these peer-run organizations. And that's one of the areas that we're going to be providing more information about as we further develop the expertise in that area.
Thank you, Rita. A couple other things I want to acknowledge. People are looking for training that would help them be better supporters and allies of people in the LGBTQ+ community, asking if there are training modules in the various trainings on that topic. I certainly know that there are trainings on the PeerTAC platform and also the youth peer support training. Family peer support is working on a training on that topic, and my guess is that the Academy of Peer Services has also addressed that as well. There are also some recommendations for upcoming training around for clinical staff on how to embrace the culture of peers. For example, who might benefit from peer linkage? What is the role of the peer? How to include peer perspective in the goals the client is developing. I think all of that is something that PeerTAC is talking about, but this person is acknowledging that clinicians sometimes see peers as more of a social resource and don't always understand how peers use lived experience in their work with clients. So these are important and more trauma training. This is so important. And I just want everyone to know that we are seeing this and taking really good notes. I'm also seeing questions about what does this look like going forward in terms of compensation for peers that makes the job workable for them. And as the system changes, structurally, the mental health system changes, how do we make sure that peer services can be as broadly available as possible? So I'm just acknowledging a few of these things. They're not necessarily questions that have answers, but making sure that they are kind of recorded here as a part of this conversation.
I did want to plug as far as trauma training. We are, through the Academy of Peer Services, our virtual community is combining efforts with the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, their peer and community health worker workforce consortium is a big mouthful, but we are doing a 3-part series that starts tomorrow with Kathy Cave on trauma in the workplace. And we fully anticipate being able to bring that training over to PeerTAC at some point in the near future. But if you want to catch it live, it's going to be at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I will put
Put a link in the chat for us,
Yeah.
please.
Chat. Yep.
Yeah. There's a really important question that's very broad here, and I think we want to talk about it. And I'm going to try to get to as many of these as possible. But this one is, as PeerTAC creates trainings, especially on the level of supervision and operations side of things, will PeerTAC be including the perspective of peers?
Yes. I mean, I think that's the short answer, but that's what we keep reaching out. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear their perspective. Definitely want to hear from folks, because again, we want to know what's going to be helpful in terms of training. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the success? So yes, we will be reaching out, and we have a number of peers on our team and on our advisory board, and we'll be tapping into that as well. So we do plan to incorporate the peer perspective in a variety of formats.
There's a question, can a provider with a provisional certification provide services? And the answer to that is yes, although there are sometimes expiration dates on those provisional certifications. I would encourage everyone to check with the organization that awarded your credential or certification about that, but provisional is good. There is, someone's asking a question about, is there a specific template for writing notes for peer services that would pass inspection for billing? And do they follow the format used for other services, other direct care services?
Yeah, so I'll take that question. So I think it follows the format of other services, right? There's some key pieces when you're documenting progress notes. For family peer support, it's a little nuancy just in terms of how they write the note, because they are essentially doing the service on behalf of a child. So that gets a little It's a little different, but I think, yeah, so generally the documentation format is what you would see with other services. Now, if you want some resources for documenting just services in general, we do have, CTAC has a resource called the Documentation Done Right series. I would encourage folks to look at that to get some background on how to document mental health services broadly and generally. Might just help you get some feedback. So we can try to put the link in the chat. Maybe if we can find the link, we can put it in there so that you can have access to it. But it's a good question, and we plan to do more, I think, under PeerTAC.
Someone's asking about certification to work specifically with veterans. Rita, I heard you speak a little bit about that. And then Matthew provided some information that said VAs, Veterans Administration's programs in New York State, require veteran peer support specialists to be certified as New York State certified peer specialists. So it sounds like there isn't a separate certification for folks working with veterans, right?
Yeah, they require state certification and an exam. I'm not sure what their current criteria is, but they used to have 6 different training programs that they would go through. They would take any one of the 6. But yeah, they have specific training that they require.
Okay. For those with provisional certifications, what is required to be a peer support specialist without it identifying as provisional? There's a related question here also about, just to clarify, I think, Amanda, you mentioned that if a person had a certified recovery peer advocate credential, they could bill for mental health peer services as long as they are currently actively working on obtaining their mental health peer credential. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what the regulations are, what they say about one's certification status and ability to work in these programs.
Well, for billing, any provisional certification or credential is allowed for billing Medicaid And so again, if someone is coming in as a SERPA provisional, again, we ask that they, that there's expectations and they know ahead of time that they'll be asked to pursue a mental health peer credential. But provisional certification on the SERPA side would count for billing in the mental health treatment, outpatient treatment, rehabilitative services program.
Thank you, Amanda. And typically what's required for folks to move from provisional to professional in any of these credentials and certifications is some additional coursework. It depends on the credential. Some documentation of a specific number of hours of experience. And then in some cases, some additional letters of recommendation. But the big difference between a provisional and a professional certification or credential is the completion of additional coursework and accumulation of hours of experience. I don't know if any of our credentialing folks want to speak to that at all, but they've made it so that you have some time to do that too.
And I think you had it, you hit it right on the head. It's the difference is the accumulated hours of work experience as that peer provider and some additional trainings. And I know for family peer and youth peer, it's also a recommendation from a supervisor. That's the difference.
And for the certified peer specialist, it has to be supervised work experience, 2,000 hours. Not all of it has to be supervised, but it has to be signed off by a supervisor.
Yeah, and for family peer, it's 1,000 hours, and for youth peer, I believe it's 600 hours. And if I'm wrong, Robbie, please correct me.
That's correct, 600 hours.
Hey. Someone is asking, as long as I have the two of you off mute, how or where a person can verify someone's credential or certification.
For family and youth peer, on our Families Together website, there is a page where you can look up a name to see if they are credentialed. If the name appears, then they are credentialed. If it does not, then they are currently not. I did put links to both, and I'll do that again. I'll put the links to both of those youth peer and family peer credential pages in the chat in just a moment.
And likewise, you can go to the certification board, which I can also put in the chat.
All right. Matthew, I don't know if you see any other questions. Amanda, you answered a question in the chat, which is, I think, maybe a nice way to end this conversation on. And the person was questioning whether or not Medicaid was taking peer services seriously and valuing peer services. This person said they know it's valuable, but, is the system recognizing it? And I think your response really was nicely addressed that, not trying to speak for CMS, but to speak for the Office of Mental Health. And I wonder if you want to just say a word about that to kind of wrap us up here.
Sure. It's the Office of Mental Health, is tremendously values peer support, and we were one of the first states to successfully bill Medicaid for peer support services, and so the CMS is more kind of a neutral entity, but with the support from the President's office on mental health, peer support is mentioned several times, and with new leadership at SAMHSA, we're on a national scale, we're really encouraged by their commitment, and we're a ways away from this, but on a national scale, also looking to work towards Medicare billing for peer support. That is a ways away, but I just wanted to let folks know that was in that's in the mix in the conversation. So it's refreshing to have that national support, state support, and through these efforts and continuing efforts, we're hoping that we can all work together to grow our our peer support workforce, and also create opportunities for career ladders for peer workers. And so there's also a multi-agency work group with OASIS and DOH to also address that on a multi-agency level within the state. So there's a lot of value and support, and hopefully we'll see more and more progress as we go along. And thank you, Dennis, for asking that question.
Thank you, Amanda. And so as we are coming to the end of our webinar, and just let me say thank you to everyone who is chatting in. It's great questions, great suggestions for feedback and training. And so it was very helpful. So thank you all. Just want to share with you a few things before we end, which is just how to contact us. We've mentioned that we're going to post our resources, this presentation and the slides on our landing page. It's not the full website, but you can go there and access this information, and you'll see that here at PeerTAC.org. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@PeerTAC.org, and we'll make sure to respond to you. And then if you want to be on our listserv so that you're aware of all of the upcoming offerings that we're having, you can subscribe here. And then again, I just want to give another plug for the survey. So you'll be getting a feedback survey from today's event, just letting us know kind of what you thought and what you'd like to hear more about. But also then we're doing the survey that we talked about in the beginning, and the link is in the slides. If you can just circle back around to that and just provide us some information as it relates to implementing peer support services in clinics. And so I think with that, we are also, I'm going to, Rita, is there any last words that you'd like to say?
I just want to thank our partners at OMH, our partners at Families Together, our partnership within PeerTAC. It's been an amazing journey so far, and I'm really looking forward to what comes next.
Yeah, and hoping everyone will join us in the future.
Yes, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much.